morning, Carl. Or good
Well, greetings.
afternoon in London.
Yes, it is afternoon. Greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I think we finally mostly figured out the 5-hour time zone difference between me being here in the
Yeah.
US and you being in the UK right now. And if you can overcome like massive time zones to figure out how to schedule a podcast, I feel like anything is possible in the world of content.
For sure. For sure. In fact, that's probably a good lead into what we should talk about. Like, you know how people finally feel like they've gotten over maybe the imposter syndrome. They figured out like they have something to say. They've even if they have to, they've relied on other people saying, "Hey, you've got something to say." And now they run up. I'd love to talk like really specific, kind of nuts and bolts. Like, how do you take it from a thing like, let's say, let's assume based on the last episode that people now we've got words on a page or a voice file. Like, how do I now put it into the world? And maybe we can talk about different. I think of them as artifacts. People get so hung up on the art. Like, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to. No, don't get hung up on that. But let's talk about specific artifacts now. An artifact being a blog post, an email newsletter, a podcast. Like, I'd like to walk through how I do it and how you do it. How do you actually put it into the world?
So I like that framing, including we're going to call them artifacts going forward, right? I've always struggled with this phenomenon that when we talk about things like content and content for marketing, that a lot of it is written. Certainly a lot of what we put out is written. A lot of what you put out is written. And I find for some advisors, that becomes the blocking point because they say, I'm not a writer. That's not my thing. And then we get hung up on, I can't do marketing and communicate this way because I'm quote, not a writer. First of all, you may be more of a writer than you realize. We'll come back to that in a moment. But secondarily, just the point, like, you don't have to write it. Like, if you like talking, talk and turn it into a podcast. If you're great in front of people, awesome. Stand in front of a camera and turn it into a video. Like, there's so many different ways that you can make content a thing that you put out in the world. So I'm with you. Like, we're going to run with just calling this an artifact. You make an artifact that you share with the world. That might be a written thing, a video thing, an audio thing on your site, in another site. Like, there's lots of tactics about how you do that. But let's just talk about creating artifacts. Like, people are asking you a question. You want to answer the question to create some value in the world and show your expertise. You are ready to make an artifact. How do you actually make the artifact?
Yeah. Look. I could talk through the Times column or the sketches, but I think what I'd love to do, just because this is like the simplest. So I'm a huge fan of noticing when I run into a roadblock, and then making that roadblock, instead of feeling like it's a bug, making it a feature, like just flipping it. And so I was like, I kind of want to, I want to start, and this is at the encouragement, this sort of constant annoyance of Seth Godin saying, you should do this daily, you should do this daily, you should do this daily. So a little while ago, I was like, I'm going to write daily. And I actually got asked, why aren't you doing this every day why aren't you blogging every day? And I was like, well, I actually don't like to write. I process better verbally, and I like to communicate verbally, or visually, but mostly verbally. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to
be a New York Times author.
Yeah, no, and I should tell you, like, most of those columns were literally like me trying to type and then like shutting the keyboard and being, no, like this, and I would say it. So I get that feedback all the time. Like, I love your writing because it's so conversational. And I'm like, well, that's because I was talking to myself in the office. And then I started just recording it, and then I would just listen to the recording and I would write what I heard. And now, of course, there's easier ways to do that with Descript and whatever. So yeah, it was literally me talking. So remember, most people don't get talker's block. You can get writer's block. So let me just go.
That's good.
Like, here's one way to do this. This is literally how simple it was for me. I was like, I want to create a podcast. oh, but I don't want to have guests. I don't want to deal with, like, I do want to have guests, but I don't want to deal with scheduling, and like, I just can't right now. And tech and recording and quality. And so I was bummed out. So those were all excuses, like maybe even valid, like reasons not to do it. And that's the roadblock. As soon as I hit those roadblocks now, I love to go, okay, well then if that's the reason, what could I, holding that constant, what could I do? Like, okay, well, you could have a podcast with no guests. Are you allowed to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're allowed to. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on Twitter in conversations. Are you allowed to just broadcast on Twitter? Yeah. Like you're like, there's, so it's like, okay, well then no guests. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Then make it short. So like, okay, what if I just notice one thing a day and record an audio? So and I'm skipping a step actually. Even before I started thinking about the podcast, I was like, I'm just going to record an audio every day and tell no one. I'm not even going to put it in the world. It's just for me to notice. It's like a private journal about the business finance world, you know, doing things, permission, like imposter. So I started recording them and I was saving them in a Dropbox folder, and the team saw them and they're like, hey, what are these? Like, can we? And I was like, no, just because I didn't want the pressure. So they're like, well, this is really amazing. Can we share it in the newsletter? I was like, sure, whatever. So they started putting it on SoundCloud and sharing it in the newsletter. So SoundCloud, free, easy. So far we're an Apple Memo. Greetings, this is Carl. Today I want to talk about, like, it was that simple. Nobody has to edit it. Goes up on SoundCloud. After a little while, people were listening to it in the newsletter. They would see it on SoundCloud and they started writing me, I love your podcast. And I was like, no, it's not a podcast. And they'd be like, I actually got an email from somebody who said, Carl, I don't know what you call it, but is there any way you could put it on iTunes so I can listen to it in the car? And I was like, okay, fine. So we put it up as a podcast. So now it's literally, I record an audio file. I go into SoundCloud. Nobody touches it. Nobody edits it, nothing. I upload it to SoundCloud. SoundCloud is linked to iTunes. There are easier ways, but there are better ways, but that's super simple. And I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and we crossed 1 million downloads. And that we haven't told anybody. It's a secret podcast. You know, like I don't broadcast it. So that's like, the only reason I want to enable that is I don't buy excuses anymore. Like I don't buy them. Like I don't like, if you have an excuse for why, assuming you want to do this, assuming you agree that your voice needs to be heard in the world, or assuming that you just have a feeling that your voice needs to be heard in the world, and we're throwing fuel on it, assuming you want to do this, no excuses. Let's just look at those excuses and go, okay, cool. What if I created something that actually was a constraint? And that became, now I'm like, I love people, I get this feedback. I love your podcast because it's short and just you, right? And those were and it's right from
and originally it was like, oh God, I don't know if I can make something long enough to be valuable, and I got to find all these guests that I don't know if I can get. So like, I'm just going to do something short and me because it's all I've got time for. And then that turned out to be your greatest feature of that,
right.
Of that podcast.
I think that's the same thing with the hand-drawn sketches. I tried to download Adobe Illustrator. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Adobe Illustrator, it said like 4 hours to download. And I thought, any program that takes 4 hours to download, I should not be touching. So then I was like, well, what should I do? Well, I'll do it on Sharpie and cardstock and stick it through a scanner. And I tried last year, again, I try every couple of years to hire a designer and turn these into beautifully graphic ones. Jack Butcher and I just worked on this a little bit. And the feedback I get is, no, where'd the hand-drawn ones go? Right? So the bugs that originally feel like bugs, that old saying in software, it's a feature, not a bug.
Right.
Like the bugs you can flip and they can become features. So that's just one example of like, everybody right now could do that tomorrow. You pull up your iPhone. The iPhone mic's good enough. The AirBud mic's good enough. I just bought a little Rode lavalier mic that's good enough. You record, you hit save, you upload it to SoundCloud, you connect SoundCloud to podcasts, and every once in a while you say something about it. If you really want to throw fuel on it, share a tweet a day. Today I talked about this. Listen here. You do that for 18 months, you will have something. Yeah. It's not complex.
I think you make an important point as well around just the ways you can use the spoken word to get through a lot of this. As you've put it, like most people don't get talker's block. At worst, our talker's block is our own self-doubts about should I really talk about this and share it out with anybody? But if someone asks you a question, very few financial advisors that I know that can't figure out how to talk an answer when a client gives you a question.
Right.
Which means to me one of the most straightforward ways, if you're not sure how to create content, regardless of whether you want to be podcast or video or blog post, they can all start with talking. In fact, I know someone that produces most of their blog posts. They just take the question and they speak the answer into an audio file. They use Dragon Naturally Speaking to turn it into a written article, a written transcript. And then they send it to a freelance editor and say, make it pretty because I just talked through this. And the freelance editor takes their stuff, their knowledge, their expertise, and makes it nice grammar. I had heard this statement from, I think I heard it originally from Gary Klaben, although I believe he had drawn it from somewhere else as well, that you don't have to be a writer to be an author. Yeah. Being an author is about having, some thought, some idea, something that you share into the world. It came from your mind. You created it and put it out there. The way that you delivered it, the way that you framed it, the way that you answered that question. If you're not a writer, fine. There are lots of people out there who can help make the words pretty and grammatically sharp, particularly in today's world where there are a lot of very, very smart people at media companies who are unemployed because of the challenges in the media industry. Like, there are a lot of really good people who can help you take your ideas and turn them into a written thing. If you're not sure where to find them, just go to Upwork.com, which is a freelancer site, and start looking for editors. You'll find people with a redonkulous amount of experience doing this who can help you with that. But it really can be, I'll just say, like, as simple as that. I know an advisor who all of their blog posts is just taking a question that a client asks, answering it into Dragon Naturally Speaking, and sending that transcript off to an editor to say, make this pretty. I know someone else who creates their articles. Literally all he does, he takes the question. He just does I think literally what you do, like Apple voice memos. He just voice memos the answer and sends a sound file to a writer editor that says, take my words and make them written in paragraphs. Right?
Yeah, look, that's so important. And one thing to notice about that whole process, I love that. Like, there's just no reason. And you could even cut one more step out. You could literally just post the sound file on your blog.
Yeah.
Like, people go in there, you embed the SoundCloud player, they press play. That's what the New York Times did. So there's another funny story is I used to take my Times column and I would record my thoughts about it. So it was kind of like the behind the scenes, like the backstory. And I would put that up on SoundCloud. Oh, like a couple days after. And the audio, like the sort of multimedia editor team at the New York Times found them. And they're like, could we just embed that in the article? And I was like, yeah, like the Imposter Syndrome got something like 300,000 listens because they just started embedding it in the so you can take SoundCloud makes it so easy to just post SoundCloud or any other service, by the way, to post. So yeah, like thinking about ways that you could even, yeah, but I love the idea of recording something, and I'm going to just be straight up in your face, like recording something every day, saving them, sending the whole lot to an editor. They pick one a week to clean up. Now, you are not hiring a ghostwriter. That's the important thing to realize here. A ghostwriter, you say, hey, write something about diversification for me. right? That's different than you recording 5 to 10 minutes about diversification.
About diversification. Just, take what I said in free-flowing conversation and, make it some nice paragraphs with appropriate breaks.
Yeah, you touch the keyboard is all I think about. I have a writer that does that for me. His name's Chris. Chris, I try not to touch the keyboard. Chris writes Carl better than Carl writes Carl. Like his entire job is to capture the voice. If it doesn't sound like me, we hit delete. So yeah, so that's a great tactical thing. Like no more excuse. There's no place to hide. Assuming you think this is there are plenty of reasons why this is not something you even need to worry about right now. Like if you're a financial advisor building a practice, there might be reasons you don't need to do this. No problem. But assuming you think it's a good idea, there's no place to hide. So let's go through another one, Michael. Tell me about like specifics, like nut and bolt. Like let's say a financial planner wants to write a weekly email newsletter. What tools would they specifically use?
So weekly email newsletter. So I'll frame this from our mechanism. Well, so first and foremost, like all you really need to get it out there is, a way to deliver emails on a weekly basis. So you can do this as simply as I'm going to make a mailing list of my clients and hit the send button in Outlook, or I'm going to tag my clients in my CRM system and once a week do an export, dump those email addresses in, paste them into Outlook and hit send. And I know people that do it like that straightforward. I am a fan of like actually using an email system. There are a bunch of marketing automation systems to do this. The most common one I see in advisor world by far is MailChimp. The starting base package is free. You can just start adding client email addresses into your list there. You can take people who opt into to doing this as prospects, and MailChimp can queue it up. They have templates built. You can get another freelancer on Upwork to maybe spend a few minutes making a slightly prettier version of a template with
pause. Hey, pause real quick.
Drop content in.
Okay. Let's just pretend like we're going to do MailChimp. Mm-hmm. How would let's say that we're saying it's so easy, but I have people show up at my house sometimes, like when we need something done, like the sink needs to be unclogged or something. And they're like, Carl, that's so easy, do it. I know when somebody tells me it's so tiling the floor is so easy. Let's pretend like we're saying it's so easy to set up your mail. I'm talking specifics about MailChimp account now, just MailChimp for now. This applies to plenty others, but just MailChimp for now. We're saying it's so easy. Let's pretend like you don't even want to have to deal with that so easy part. Use the word Upwork. Just talk us through what you would do if you, and how much are we talking here cost-wise to hire somebody to get your MailChimp account set up so it's all ready for you to do the ongoing part?
I haven't quoted it out directly on the setup end. If I had to guesstimate, you are literally talking like $50 to $100. I mean, right. For someone that has done this, it's going to be an hour or two of their work at the most in order to do this. I mean, we produce a giant podcast and put it out there, right? Like multiple hours every episode on a weekly basis. That's got to be prepped, edited. There's a bunch of production work that happens behind the scenes. If I boil that down to like an individual episode rate, I think I pay less than $150 an episode to have a multi-hour episode hand-produced and edited, so that from my end, like my entire podcast production process for that whole thing to handle a nearly 2-hour interview is I schedule a 2-hour time block, have the conversation, and I literally don't do anything after that. Like I send an email to the person and says, I recorded the file. It's in the folder it automatically saves to. Let me know how it turns out. And I don't touch it again. Like I don't do anything more for the podcast than literally the time it takes to have the conversation and to send one email to someone up front that says, would you like to be on my podcast, right? It's someone I have to invite them on to be a guest because I didn't have the time and capacity for the rest. And so I didn't make it any more complex than it needs to be. And I hired the rest out for what at the end of the day is a remarkably small cost for a big chunk of time. Again, like there are a lot of very hireable people in the media world to help with pretty much all of this. Like what it really comes down to at the end of the day, if you want to have a MailChimp weekly newsletter, speak the thing into your microphone that you want to record. And if you
let's go step by step. So
like,
speak the thing in the microphone.
Speak the thing in the microphone. Send an email to the person you hired with the sound file, and don't do anything else. Those are the 2 steps.
Okay, I agree, but let's real quickly. So step 1, we're going to notice things in the world and we're going to write them in our notebook. Step 2, we're going to schedule a time every week to review that notebook. And again, don't get hung up on the artifacts. Everybody uses the artifact as an excuse, like notebook, what notebook, what notebook? Like just pick one. What did the Buddha say? There's 80,000 paths to enlightenment. Pick one. So like you Evernote, Google Keep, you can use email, whatever. You got a notebook, you notice things. Step 2, you schedule a time every week to review the things you noticed.
Yep.
Step 3, you pull out your recorder of choice. I'm making it really easy on you. You pull out your iPhone or your phone, you hit record in voice memo. You talk about what you thought and what you've been thinking about the thing that you noticed. You take step 4, you take that voice file. If you want the easiest, simplest path, you take that voice file, you send it to somebody and say, turn this into a 250 to 500 words. Capture this in my voice in as few words as possible, whatever, 500 words. 250 words. Once you get that back.
That's an editor writer type you probably found on Upwork. I'll also note Fiverr has a bunch of these folks that do this work as well. But like you pulled them from a freelance site. They do your thing. It's not terribly expensive. If you hire someone you don't like them, find someone else. There's a bajillion people on that site.
And here, let me give you even another trick on step 4. When you're going to find that person, hire 4. Send all of them the same thing on the first round. Just send all of them the same thing with the exact same instructions. Get back, look at the one you like the best, send them the second one. Like just that's the way I would do it. So that's step 4. It comes back. Yeah, it comes. Well, you don't have to tell them, and you're paying them. This isn't one of those goofy like do a logo and we'll consider you. No, you pay them for it. Of course, you pay them for the experiment. So then step 5 is you got a piece of content. Step 6, you've already done. You've called. You've hired a MailChimp person. You've called them like on the phone. Hi, hello. So you've hired a MailChimp person. They have simply set up your account. They've uploaded all your email addresses that you give them, that you have permission to use, of course, all those things. They've established a template. I don't actually like templates. I like just plain text emails, but that's fine too. The open rates are better, by the way, but it's fine if you want a template. They've established the template. So it's waiting for you. You get the content back from step 5. Mm-hmm. Step 6 is you open your MailChimp thing, you put the thing in, and you hit send. And you could get rid of step 6, you putting the content in and hitting send, with another person, either on your team or somebody else.
And so in practice, you kind of in that flow, our step 6 is we take that article and we copy paste it into WordPress on our blog.
Amen.
We hit post there, and MailChimp has what's called an RSS to email automation that says, oh, anytime something new appears on your website in a blog feed, it detects that a new thing has been posted, and it automatically queues it up and sends it out in an email. So in practice, even for our team sending whatever the ungodly number of emails are that we send in MailChimp now, nobody on our team even logs into MailChimp. All we do is hit the post button on our website, and everything even from there happens on an automated basis. That was an automation that we created for, I think, $150 9 years ago. Right. And we haven't had to touch it once in 9 years and probably 1,000 articles.
Yeah, so good, so good. So that's like so simple. And then let's just go one step further that we will cover in depth in another conversation. But the next step is that thing now is a blog post. Mm-hmm. It's been sent out as an email. If you wanted to, that original voice file, it wouldn't take much for you. The voice file you're going to send to the editor to write, it wouldn't take much for you to speak that in a way that was also accessible publicly. So instead of saying, hey, I'm thinking this, this, and this, you could just say, hey, it's Carl here. Then that voice file could be uploaded as a podcast, really easily. And then, and this is what we want to cover in another episode, the content snacks episode, would be it's very easy to take that one piece of content, turn that into anywhere from 5 to 20 tweets, every one of them pointing back to your newsletter sign up. Right? Like, so the purpose of the tweet is say, hey, here's something valuable. If you want to go deeper, go here. Right? And again, you can do that, but there's also companies. We ran into one called Repurpose Factory that like and you could build a system internally where you just say, hey, somebody on my staff, please read this and pick out 5 zingers. That's what we call them internally. Like pick out 5 little concepts that are tweetable. Share it on Twitter. Guess what? Throw it in a little card, share it on Instagram. And you're done. Like if you do this right, if you understand the leverage of this, and again, I get so fired up about this because I know it will change the world. And the people listening to this are the very, very people. Like, you are the secret society, right? Nobody knows you exist. And it's your voices that we want in the world. That's the reason I get so fired up about this. But if you understand the power of this, like, I don't know what you could, I would imagine I could wrap all that up. I don't even know that we would get to $1,000 a month. I think we would still be $500 a month, including the tweets and the Instagram posts. But even if it was $1,000 a month, I can't think of a better way to use money in terms of leverage. You could literally just do the recording and everything else happens. And we walk through it very specifically here. So there's nothing, if you think it's a good idea, there's nowhere to hide.
And again, in the piece that starts with all of it is, and all you're doing is answering in a microphone the questions that clients are asking you already, that you were already answering with your voice to other people anyway, just instead of doing it one client meeting at a time, also do it once to the microphone so that you can share it with the broader world as well, and show a little of your expertise.
So good. So there's literally no excuse. I would love to see either on Twitter at Behavior Gap or hello@behaviorgap.com if you want to email. I want to see examples of these. Like, if you're doing this and you're starting it and you feel like no one's listening to you, like, I want to. So send those to me. I'm sure Michael feels the same way. Like, send them to us. Those want to see it. We want to see them. In fact, Michael's going to now give you his personal cell phone number so you can call him and tell him about it.
Or you could just tweet it to me. I don't quite want to bomb the cell phone, but thank you, Carl. But at Michael Kitces on Twitter, questions@kitces.com on the site. That stuff really does route to me. I would love to see what people do and how they take this and put it out into the world.
Amen. So good, Michael. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.